Welcome. Today we're reading the chapter Rage and Reversal of the novel Tarzan and the Ant-Men. Last time, Tarzan and Komodo Florencil discussed their desire to escape together and take Talaskar along with them, devising a plan to deceive their captors into believing that Tarzan could not speak their language. Tarzan successfully joins a timbering crew, where he discovers that Komodo Florencil has been brought back as a slave, and they communicate through a clever ruse to maintain their connection. As they approach the royal dome, they encounter Zoanthrohago, who reveals his disdain for Tarzan and holds him and Komodo Florencil captive, leading to tension with the ruler of Minuni, Elkamoelhago.
The alley women, 50 strong, sallied forth into the forest to chastise their recalcitrant males. They carried their heavy bludgeons and many feathered pebbles, but most formidable of all was their terrific rage. Never in the memory of one of them had man dared question their authority. Never had he presumed to show aught but fear of them. But now, instead of slinking away at their approach, he had dared defy them, to attack them, to slay them. But such a condition was too preposterous, too unnatural, to exist, nor would it exist much longer. Had they had speech, they would have said that, and a number of other things. It was looking black for the men. The women were in an ugly mood. But what else could be expected of women who were denied the power of speech? And in this temper they came upon the men in a large clearing where the renegades had built a fire and were cooking the flesh of a number of antelope. Never had the women seen their men so sleek and trim. Always before had they appeared skinny to the verge of cadaverousness, for in the past they had never fared so well as since the day that Tarzan of the Apes had given weapons to the son of the first woman. Where before they had spent their lives fleeing in terror from their terrible women, with scarce time to hunt for decent food, now they had leisure and peace of mind, and their weapons brought them flesh that otherwise they might not have tasted once in a year. From caterpillars and grubworms they had graduated to an almost steady diet of antelope meat. But the women gave very little heed at the moment to the physical appearance of the men. They had found them. That was enough. They were creeping nearer when one of the men looked up and discovered them, and so insistent are the demands of habit that he forgot his newfound independence, and leaping to his feet, bolted for the trees. The others, scarce waiting to know the cause of his precipitancy, followed close upon his heels. The women raced across the clearing as the men disappeared among the trees upon the opposite side. The former knew what the men would do. Once in the forest, they would stop behind the nearest trees and look back to see if their pursuers were coming in their direction. It was this silly habit of the males that permitted their being easily caught by the less agile females. But all the men had not disappeared. One had taken a few steps in the mad race for safety, and had then halted and wheeled about, facing the oncoming women. He was the son of the first with their mighty hands, but they learned then that spears were more formidable weapons than bludgeons, with the result that those who did not fall wounded turned and fled. It was then that the son of the first woman revealed possession of a spark of generalship that decided the issue for that day, and perhaps for all time. His action was apocal in the existence of the Zertalakolols. Instead of being satisfied with repulsing the women, instead of resting upon laurels gloriously won, he turned the tables upon the hereditary foe and charged the women, signaling his fellows to accompany him. And when they saw the women running from them, so enthused were they by this reversal of a custom ages old, they leaped swiftly in pursuit. They thought that the son of the first woman intended that they should slay all of the enemy, and so they were surprised when they saw him overhaul a comely young female and, seizing her by the hair, disarm her. So remarkable did it seem to them that one of their number, having a woman in his power, did not immediately slay her. They were constrained to pause and gather around him, asking questions in their strange sign language. "Why do you hold her? Why do you not kill her? Are you not afraid that she will kill you?" were some of the many that were launched at him. "I am going to keep her," replied the son of the first woman. "I do not like to cook. She shall cook for me. If she refuses, I shall stick her with this." And he made a jab toward the young woman's ribs with his spear, a gesture that caused her to cower and drop fearfully upon one knee. The men jumped up and down in excitement as the value of this plan and the evident terror of the woman for the man sank into their dull souls. "Where are the women?" they signed to one another, but the women had disappeared. One of the men started off in the direction they had gone. "I go," he signaled. "I come back with a woman of my own to cook for me." In a mad rush the others followed him, leaving the son of the first woman alone with his she. He turned upon her. "You will cook for me?" he demanded. To his signs she but returned a sullen, snarling visage. The son of the first woman raised his spear, and with the heavy shaft struck the girl upon the head, knocking her down, and he stood over her, himself snarling and scowling, menacing her with further punishment, while she cowered where she had fallen. He kicked her in the side. "Get up!" he commanded. Slowly she crawled to her knees, and embracing his legs gazed up into his face, with an expression of dog-like adulation and devotion. "You will cook for me?" he demanded again. "Forever," she replied, in the sign language of their people. Tarzan had remained but a short time in the little room, adjoining that in which Xoanthrahago had received Elcamoelhago, when he was summoned to appear before them alone, and as he entered the room his master motioned him to approach the desk behind which the two men sat. There was no other person in the room, even the warriors having been dismissed. "You are quite positive that he understands nothing of our language?" demanded the king. "He has not spoken a word since he was captured," replied Xoanthrahago. "We had supposed him some new form of Zertalakolol, until it was discovered that he possessed a language through which he was able to communicate with the other Trahanadalmakusian slave. It is perfectly safe to speak freely before him, all-wise." Elcamoelhago cast a quick, suspicious glance at his companion. He would have preferred that Xoanthrahago of all men address him as all-glorious. It was less definite in its implication. He might deceive others, even himself, as to his wisdom, but he was perfectly aware that he could not fool Xoanthrahago. "We have never discussed fully," said the king, "the details of this experiment. It was for this purpose that I came to the laboratory today. Now that we have the subject here, let us go into the matter fully, and determine what next step we should take." "Yes, all-wise," replied Xoanthrahago. "Call me Thagosoto," snapped Elcamoelhago. "Yes, Thagosoto," said the prince, using the Manunian word for chief royal or king, as Elcamoelhago had commanded. "Let us discuss the matter, by all means. It presents possibilities of great importance to your throne." He knew that what Elcamoelhago meant by discussing the matter consisted only in receiving from Xoanthrahago a detailed explanation of how he had reduced the stature of the slave Xoanthrol to 1/4 its original proportions, but he proposed, if possible, to obtain value received for the information, which he knew the king would use for his own aggrandizement, giving Xoanthrahago no credit whatever for his discoveries or all the long moons he had devoted to accomplishing this marvelous scientific miracle. "Before we enter into this discussion, O Thagosoto," he said, "I beg that you will grant me one boon which I have long desired and have hitherto hesitated to request, knowing that I did not deserve the recognition I crave for my poor talents and my mean service to thy illustrious and justly renowned rule." "What boon do you wish?" demanded Elcamoelhago crustily. At heart he feared this wisest of men, and, like the coward that he was, with him to fear was to hate. If he could have destroyed Xoanthrahago he would gladly have done so, but he could not afford to do this, since from this greatest of Walmacs came whatever show of scientific ability the king could make, as well as all the many notable inventions for the safeguarding of the royal person. "I would sit at the royal council," said Xoanthrahago simply. The king fidgeted. Of all the nobles of Veltopismachus here, was the very last he would wish to see numbered among the royal councillors, whom he had chosen with especial reference to the obtuseness of their minds. "There are no vacancies," he said at last. "The ruler of all men might easily make a vacancy," suggested Xoanthrahago, "or create a new post-assistant chief of chiefs, for example, so that when Gofoloso is absent, there would be one to take his place. Otherwise I should not have to attend upon your council meetings, but devote my time to the perfection of our discoveries and inventions." Here was a way out, and Elcamoelhago seized it. He had no objection to Xoanthrahago being a royal councillor, and thus escaping the burdensome income tax, which the makers of the tax had been careful to see proved no burden to themselves, and he knew that probably that was the only reason that Xoanthrahago wished to be a councillor. No, the king had no objection to the appointment, provided it could be arranged that the new minister was present at no council meetings, for even Elcamoelhago would have shrunk a bit from claiming as his own all the great discoveries of Xoanthrahago had Xoanthrahago been present. "Very well," said the king, "you shall be appointed this very day, and when I want you at the council meetings I will send for you." Xoanthrahago bowed. "And now," he said, "to the discussion of our experiments, which we hope will reveal a method for increasing the stature of our warriors when they go forth to battle with our enemies, and of reducing them to normal size once more when they return." "I hate the mention of battles," cried the king with a shudder. "But we must be prepared to win them when they are forced upon us," suggested Xoanthrahago. "I suppose so," assented the king, "but once we perfect this method of ours, we shall need but a few warriors, and the rest may be turned to peaceful and useful occupations. However, go on with the discussion." Xoanthrahago concealed a smile, and rising, walked around the end of the table and stopped beside the ape-man. "Here," he said, placing a Tangadiakon and others, They have done so in as short a period as 3 moons. There have been cases where normal stature was regained gradually during a period of 7 suns, and others where the subject passed suddenly from a reduced size to normal size in less than 100 heartbeats, this latter phenomenon being always accompanied by fainting and unconsciousness when it occurred during waking hours. "Of course," commented Elcomwell. "Now let us see. I believe the thing is simpler than you imagine. You say that to reduce the size of this subject you struck him with a rock upon the base of the skull. Therefore, to enlarge his size, the most natural and scientific thing to do would be to strike him a similar blow upon the forehead. Fetch the rock, and we will prove the correctness of my theory." For a moment Xoanthrahago was at a loss as to how best to circumvent the stupid intention of the king without humiliating his pride and arousing his resentment. But the courtiers of Elcomwell were accustomed to think quickly in similar emergencies, and Xoanthrahago speedily found an avenue of escape from his dilemma. "Your sagacity is the pride of your people, Thagosoto," he said, "and your brilliant hyperbole the despair of your courtiers. In a clever figure of speech you suggest the way to achievement. By reversing the manner in which we reduce the stature of Xoanthrol, we should be able to increase it. But alas, I have tried this and failed. But wait, let us repeat the experiment precisely as it was originally carried out, and then, by reversing it, we shall perhaps be enabled to determine why I have failed in the past." He stepped quickly across the room to one of a series of large cupboards that lined the wall, and opening the door of it revealed a cage in which were a number of rodents. Selecting one of these, he returned to the table, where, with wooden pegs and bits of cord, he fastened the rodent securely to a smooth board, its legs spread out and its body flattened, the underside of the lower jaw resting firmly upon a small metal plate set flush with the surface of the board. He then brought forth a small wooden box and a large metal disc, the latter mounted vertically between supports that permitted it to be revolved rapidly by means of a hand crank. Mounted rigidly upon the same axis as the revolving disc was another which remained stationary. The latter disc appeared to have been constructed of 7 segments, each of a different material from all the others, and from each of these segments a pad, or brush, protruded sufficiently to press lightly against the revolving disc. To the reverse side of each of the 7 segments of the stationary disc, a wire was attached, and these wires Xoanthrahago now connected to 7 posts projecting from the upper surface of the wooden box. A single wire attached to a post upon the side of the box had at its other extremity a small, curved metal plate attached to the inside of a leather collar. This collar Xoanthrahago adjusted about the neck of the rodent so that the metal plate came in contact with its skin at the base of the skull and as close to the hypophysis gland as possible. He then turned his attention once more to the wooden box, upon the top of which, in addition to the 7 binding posts, was a circular instrument consisting of a dial about the periphery of which were a series of hieroglyphics. From the center of this dial projected 7 tubular, concentric shafts, each of which supported a needle, which was shaped or painted in some distinguishing manner, while beneath the dial 7 small metal discs were set in the cover of the box, so that they lay in the arc of a circle from the center of which a revolving metal shaft was so arranged that its free end might be moved to any one of the 7 metal discs at the will of the operator. The connections having all been made, Xoanthrahago moved the free end of the shaft from one of the metal discs to another, keeping his eyes at all times intently upon the dial, the 7 needles of which moved variously as he shifted the shaft from point to point. Elcomwell was an intent, if somewhat bewildered, observer, and the slave, Xoanthrol, unobserved, had moved nearer the table that he might better watch this experiment which might mean so much to him. Xoanthrahago continued to manipulate the revolving shaft, and the needles moved hither and thither from one series of hieroglyphics to another, until at last the Walmac appeared satisfied. "It is not always easy," he said, "to attune the instrument to the frequency of the organ upon which we are working. From all matter and even from such incorporeal a thing as thought there emanate identical particles, so infinitesimal as to be scarce noted by the most delicate of my instruments. These particles constitute the basic structure of all things, whether animate or inanimate, corporeal or incorporeal. The frequency, quantity, and rhythm of the emanations determine the nature of the substance. Having located upon this dial the coefficient of the gland under discussion, it now becomes necessary, in order to so interfere with its proper functioning that the growth of the creature involved will be not only stopped but actually reversed, that we decrease the frequency, increase the quantity, and compound the rhythm of these emanations. This I shall now proceed to do." And he forthwith manipulated several small buttons upon one side of the box, and grasping the crank handle of the free disc revolved it rapidly. The result was instantaneous and startling. Before their eyes, El Comoelhago the king and Zoanthrol the slave saw the rodent shrink rapidly in size, while retaining its proportions unchanged. Tarzan, who had followed every move and every word of the Walmack, leaned far over that he might impress indelibly upon his memory the position of the 7 needles. El Comoelhago glanced up and discovered his interest. "We do not need this fellow now," he said, addressing Zoanthrahago. "Have him sent away." "Yes, Thagosoto," replied Zoanthrahago, summoning a warrior whom he directed to remove Tarzan and Komodo Florenzel to a chamber where they could be secured until their presence was again required.
Did you enjoy today's chapter of Tarzan and the Ant-Men? Why not subscribe and ring the bell?